It's fascinating, isn't it? There's obviously this story within religion around good versus bad, around this idea of God and his army coming against evil and sin and its negativity on the world and waging war. And the sort of kind of classic Christian idea, I use the sort of Christian terminology because that's the one I'm most familiar with, is the idea that we're in this sort of shadowland, that we're in the place that that is going to win the victory, but actually ultimately we have to navigate this life and this path ourselves and try and figure out how we can do the most good with where we are. The kind of idea of good versus evil, I think, when I was reading your book, I kind of felt like you could almost argue that good is this sort of pan-Asianism. I can't even say the word now. Anyway, your view and the view of sort of kind of physicalism, and these two things kind of, I don't know whether it's possible to view like this, but being in tension. And the reason why I kind of suggest this is because if you look at the sort of let's call it the tree of life, the evolutionary tree that we're aware of, there are obviously many branches that we're not aware of currently, but those that have been found in the fossil record and sketched out for us, if you were to actually put that tree up on a hill and shine the sun behind it so you could just see the shadow of the tree in front of you, that tree would be in tatters, like absolute ruins, like massive swaths have been ripped away as massive cataclysmic events. I think there have been 5, right, kind of wiped out most of life, and then life's emerged from there, which is fascinating in and of itself. But this sort of idea, I guess, is that there have been many avenues for conscious creatures to whatever level to be beginning to engage with sort of value, or at least expressing ways of kind of moving forwards within their experiential frameworks, to have been annihilated essentially through usually kind of very horrific ways. And I guess my sort of question is kind of, we speak as if we're on this trajectory towards a goal that the universe is going in and that it's a positive direction. But at the same time, I could very much imagine that tomorrow a nuclear war takes place because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, for instance. There are many things that could happen. I'm not saying that will, but it's a possibility, right? We need to have that on the cards. So with the sort of historical fact that we have these conscious creatures, the sort of good that I mentioned before, beginning to outplay and grow into higher and higher forms of kind of agents, and also this sort of kind of physical reality, and we can call this physicalism if we want, but just the sort of dominant reality that actually everything seems to end in disaster or death. I guess it's the problem of evil that I'm kind of throwing back at you, and kind of, we spoke about this before, but kind of saying, does this sow any seeds of doubt or any seeds of threat into this idea of pan-agentism? Like, does it begin to disrupt this sort of view that there is a fundamental value, because it seems to almost eat its own tail at certain times? Or can we honestly see a trajectory where this thing's going to continue on to a sort of meaningful place? Maybe I'm viewing this incorrectly. I'm viewing this as it has to last indefinitely, as I mentioned before, the sort of theistic view. Maybe it is just the fact that we get to partake, which means that value fundamentalism is correct. So I've said a lot of words there, Philip, so I'll just pass it back to you to kind of muse on those thoughts.
No, these are really good places to probe. I mean, I would say I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of that. I think pan-agentialism or cosmic purpose doesn't mean it's all going to end happily ever after. And I think, to my mind, the universe as we experience it is a mixture of accident and design, a funny cocktail of the two. And some things seem like the fine tuning, like I talk about psychophysical harmony in the book, which we haven't quite got into, but is related to some of the evolutionary issues I've just been talking about. So some things seem improbably good against the odds, like the fine tuning, most obviously. How come we got the right numbers for life against improbable odds? But some things seem arbitrary and gratuitous and horrific and meaningless and pointless, and the immensity of outer space. And so I think the traditional atheists have problems accounting for the former, the traditional theists have problems accounting for the latter, and to my mind, we just need a hypothesis that can account for both. I've enjoyed the recent output of YouTuber Emerson Green, who started off as a teenage new atheist and is still an atheist, but has slowly begun to take much more seriously these things that seem improbably good in reality, and had a recent video on Am I Now Agnostic? But yeah, so I mean, so I think, panagentialism, I mean, look, panagentialism is totally consistent with horrible things and horrible cancer and so on. Obviously, it has to be because these things are real. But what explains that would be that, the particles, let's say the particles underlying cancer, they don't know what they're doing, right? They're not bad. They're just pursuing their desires with. They don't understand what's going on. They're just doing the rational thing given what they know. And yeah, I think there is some kind of force or purpose or directedness. Shouldn't say force, should that sound sort of a bit wishy-washy? That fine tune the universe, right? We could. How much influence does that force have? We don't know. I try out various possibilities. So, and to the extent that my book ends, the final chapter of the book is more, what does this mean for humans and human meaning and purpose? To the extent that it ends on a positive note, it's because I argue that to a degree it can be rational to hope beyond the evidence. I like William James, who, in his great paper, The Will to Believe, that he later called, thought he should have called, and I agree with him, The Right to Believe. He talks about where there's great uncertainty, to an extent, it can be rational to hope or even believe beyond the evidence. If you've got, think about climate change. If you're just going off the evidence, you should probably think, we're not gonna deal with this, or at least think you shouldn't be confident that we will. But perhaps it can be rational to think, look, I believe we're going to make it. I'm choosing. I'm not denying the facts. But I'm choosing. I'm choosing to live in hope that we're going to make this, and that's going to give me meaning and motivation. And James talks about quite vividly about you're lost in the mountains and you've got to jump this huge chasm. And, if you're just thinking about the evidence, you think, I'm probably not going to make it. But you can think, I believe I'm going to make this. And that's, if you can do that, you've probably got more chance of making it. So I think in cosmic purposivism, there's another hard word for anyone to pronounce. Insofar as I've come to find meaning through that, it's partly about hope, maybe it's gonna all come to disaster, but I think it's very uncertain, and it can be rational to hope that we are going to get to a better place. Maybe not for eternity, maybe the universe will reach some wonderful fruition and then pass out of existence, but there is some greater reality to come, and seeing the good we do as contributing in some small way to that greater hope. And it may be a load of bollocks, but you only live once, and if things are very uncertain, and choosing to live in hope of certain things can give you meaning and purpose, then I think that's all for the good.
Yeah, it's so interesting, the kind of way you talk about the sort of fine-tuning of the universe. Obviously, most people, when they think about this, believe that there needs to be a powerful force to set the parameters to enable life to even come into fruition to start with. But then at the same time, if it is a bubbling from the bottom of goal directedness, you've almost got to ask kind of like, how does that and the parameters being fine-tuned, it's almost like this is higher level purpose and this lower level purpose kind of coming into a coalition of sorts to push us forwards. Anyway, this is probably one to kind of pick. If you enjoyed this clip, then head on over to Locals to access the full conversation right now. Supporters can access the video version, and everyone can access the audio-only version of the conversation. I'll see you over there.